items. Definitely, there was a feeling that armed forces were spending things from out of their reserves, or things which they would want to use against their own defense budget requirements. But once they have carried out that expenditure, it needed to be replenished, replaced by the Ministry of Finance, and it was not being done. And if services really had any problem, then they would also put their foot down and demand that we need the full amount. And then ultimately the thing would settle somewhere in between.
So did the Americans know that it was settling somewhere in the middle? After all, our budget figures for defense and revised numbers are splashed all over our national dailies. The government clearly had nothing to hide. And the fact that it was settling somewhere in the middle didn't seem to bother the ODRP or the Pentagon, which was approving the funds. Why? According to a think tank in the US, CSF was more of a way to reward the government for its cooperation.
The United States people in the embassy here in Islamabad is equally involved in the process. So if we are inflating, means that the people sitting in the US embassy in Islamabad, they should have realized this, or they should have pointed out at that time.
When two states are interacting and bill has been sent by a state, over there they would know that this bill has come from Pakistan and the armed forces of Pakistan. And if somebody did report that these bills were slightly inflated, they would say, okay, it's all right. It happens in this sort of business. So as long as the states are having good, even relationship, positive relationship, let's clear those bills.
But our relationship isn't what it used to be. This summer, the Government Accountability Office in the US released a report suggesting that the Pakistani armed forces had been inflating or charging extra in its CSF bills. The report made its way to a congressional hearing. Our last CSF bill was to the tune of $1.25 billion. They just gave us $100 million and asked for more invoices to support the rest of the $1.1 billion.
The problem with US policy was that they simply multiplied their enemies in Afghanistan because they started chasing the Taliban, whereas they had gone in to bring the perpetrators of 9/11 to justice. So in a classic mission creep, I think their objectives multiplied, and in that multiplication of objectives there was no priority. And in consequence, people were pushed into Pakistan, unintendedly, of course.
A recently released Pentagon report has recommended that the United States focus on regional stability and eliminating Taliban and Al-Qaeda safe havens in Pakistan, rather than achieving lasting democracy in Afghanistan.
We have suffered over 1,300 officers and men in this war. We have to sustain their families, we have to look after the education of their children. We have to give them accommodation, we have to take care of all the families. There is a huge manpower, somewhere close to 3,000 who got seriously injured in this war.
The world didn't realize that Karachi is some 1,600, 1,700 kilometers away from the war zone, and still we were paying higher premium on the inflow and outflow of goods, in other words, imports and exports. That affected our industrial production, that affected our tax collection. So the total cost which Pakistan has paid so far is over $34 billion in this 7.5 years or 8 years after 9/11.
President Obama announced his new strategy for Afghanistan late last month.
And after years of mixed results, we will not and cannot provide a blank check. Pakistan must demonstrate its commitment to rooting out Al-Qaeda and the violent extremists within its borders.
After an on-again, off-again alliance of over 50 years, where are we going? I asked Dr. Malia Lodi how she would describe the relationship between Pakistan and the US.
Transactional. And I think that's why it's so deeply resented by large numbers of people in Pakistan. We in the East do not like transactional relationships. We like relationships that are based on shared values, shared principles, and shared goals. Transactional means that you're being used for something and then you are getting reimbursed.
Pakistani leaders have used USA to serve their political ends. And you know, look at the way our leaders think that Washington is the diplomatic and political mecca of the world. So they cannot be in power, and in their concept, the road to power in Islamabad is through Washington. I think this is nonsense. I think this is where we as people must understand that we need to defend our vital interests.
This is where Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was hanged, although no signs remain. This used to be a jail, now it is a park with an American fast food and a cinema theater showing the latest Hollywood blockbuster films. In some ways, that's all the so-called champions of democracy and transparency have been able to offer Pakistan: popular culture. But with President Obama in charge, one can only hope for change. The US is finally considering giving Pakistan $7.5 billion. Not to build tanks or to load guns, but possibly to construct schools. The question remains whether Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's son-in-law and his team have what it takes to fight for Pakistan's national interests.